welcome. I'm Victoria Holmes, Managing Director for Green Schools National Network. We are excited to have you join us for our first ever book launch. The Green Schools National Network is comprised of schools and school districts at the forefront of creating healthy, equitable, and sustainable schools. The network consists of 8,500 teachers and allies, 300 schools in 15 school districts, serving over 150,000 students, and we're growing. Our vision is to ensure future generations can thrive by shaping sustainable schools. And our mission is that every learner attends a healthy, equitable, and sustainable school. Today, you'll learn how we grew from an idea to a book, and you'll hear a panel discussion. And then I'll open it up for a Q&A. Which brings me to the reason we are all here today, the official launch of Trailblazers for Whole School Sustainability. This book shows what is possible when educators resolve to blaze a trail to reimagine K-12 education for a just and sustainable future. The editors include Jennifer Seydel, Executive Director of the Green Schools National Network, Cindy Merce, Content Writer for GSNN and Independent Editor, Lisa Kensler, Emily R. and Gerald S. Leischuck Endowed Professor in Educational Leadership at Auburn University, and David Seydel, Professor Emeritus from Antioch University of New England. In February 2019, GSNN convened a Catalyst Network leaders from across the country for a research and documentation symposium designed to help educators understand their impact and tell their story. David and Lisa, as well as Hunter Gelbach from Johns Hopkins University, joined these budding authors at Vernier, a cutting-edge science education company in Portland, Oregon. This meeting was funded by the Margot Foundation with the hope that the outcomes could be shared broadly. We are excited to say that several chapters in the book emerged from that event. Other chapters were adapted from case studies that were previously published in the Green Schools Catalyst Quarterly. In addition to our editors, we'd like to thank Rochelle Duyar-Prue, Heather Dansker, and Celine Hoover for additional editing support. What we learned along the way was that it takes many hands and many hours to create content that is relevant, engaging, and written in a way that resonates with educators so they can learn about best practices related to creating healthy, equitable, and sustainable schools. So without further ado, here's Jenny Seydel to kick off an exciting discussion on whole school sustainability.
Thank you, Victoria, and thank you to our audience tonight, and thank you very much to our panelists. I am super excited about presenting to you these authors and partners in creating this exciting new book for our community. We really believe that Trailblazers is a gift to education, K-12 educators across the country. And we are honored that we had 16 educators from across the country join us in developing this book. The book is structured around in a traditional manner. We have the foreword written by Tim Baird from Encinitas Union School District, who challenges leaders to think critically about how to brand their schools and leverage what is necessary and what is important for students in the emerging 22nd century for their educational future. And then in the preface, Lisa, David, I, and Cindy write about why our students are demanding this type of school. And they understand more than any of us that education for sustainability is what is needed for a just and sustainable future. Then we move into 4 sections: leadership, curriculum and instruction, climate and culture, and facilities and operations. In each of those sections, we have 4 case studies. We've tried to incorporate case studies from across the country, from districts as large as Philadelphia and Virginia Beach City Public Schools, who you'll hear from soon, and as small as a charter school of just 180 students, New Roots Charter School up in Ithaca, New York. So we are super excited about what has emerged and the lessons learned that the authors are sharing. So with that overview, I'm going to get started with questions. This is a panel discussion. This isn't a lecture from me. And so I want to introduce our panelists. We've got Tim Cole, the Sustainability Director from the Virginia Beach City Public Schools. Tim has been a co-rabble-rouser with me in the Green Schools movement for a significant amount of time and is known across the country for his amazing work in shaping sustainable schools in a relatively conservative community. And so, Tim, thanks very much for being here, and thanks for the efforts in writing your chapter. We're honored. We also have Amy Illingworth, who is Assistant Superintendent in the Encinitas Union School District. Amy has also generated an amazing article and story of a district in California, a 10 or 12-year journey. She documents a significant journey from starting with the 3 Gs all the way to full implementation in all of the schools in her district. So Amy, we're super excited that you're here. We're also excited to hear what you're up to now. That'll be coming in our questions. So we're super excited about that. And then we have Lisa. Lisa Kensler is one of my co-editors. And again, whenever Lisa graces the screen and joins me in a conversation, it just brings pleasure. She's one of the brilliant thought leaders in the community. She has published 2 other books on this topic and that are also available through Routledge. And so we will add the links to those books in the chat so you can collect all 3 of the books that Routledge has now published on this topic. So those are our panelists. And again, let's just jump in. We'll start with a question directed specifically to Amy and Tim. Could you please give us an overview of your district and the story that you share in your chapter? And we'll start with Amy, and then Amy, you can pass the baton to Tim. And then Lisa, I have another question for you.
All right, thank you so much for having me. As you mentioned Tim Barrett, and I'm sure he is on here listening right now, and he gets all the credit for what I'm about to share because he was our superintendent in Encinitas, and he brought this work forward. I just happened to be smart enough to apply for a job here 3 years ago and joined the movement that was already in place. So I'm happy to tell the story. Encinitas is a small school district in Southern California. We have 9 schools that are kindergarten through 6th grade, just under 5,000 students at this point in time. And for years, we have had 4 pillars of distinctions that mark our district's focus areas. They have been academic excellence, 21.5 century learning, health and wellness, and environmental stewardship. And those 4 pillars have driven every strategic plan we've written, every goal and action item we've written into any plan we've gotten in the last 10 to 12 years. The case study that I share focuses on autonomy in leadership. So while we have a district focus and a system-wide green initiative, and we have an environmental stewardship plan, we welcome that each of our 9 school leaders focus on green initiatives in areas that align best with their school's specific theme or focus areas. Each of our schools has their own theme. So we have 2 schools that are dual language immersion schools. We have a school that focuses on international baccalaureate, one that focuses on teaching of the arts. And each of those focus areas helps our principals create a theme at their school. And then green initiatives look different within each of those themes. So what my case study was really all about was recognizing that you can have a district-wide initiative and then cite autonomy to create leaders to empower their schools to make the work relevant to them. So I'm excited to be here with you today.
Thank you, Amy. Tim?
All right, thanks, Jenny. So we're kind of a mid-range school division. You know, we have about 67,000 students and about 15,000 employees. We have about 86 schools. And so really, you know, the chapter that I worked on was really our origin story, kind of how we started, you know, what we've been up to, where we are now, and then hopefully, you know, it can provide some inspiration for some other folks who want to go along that same path, because I think what makes us unique is we've been doing all of this for the last 20 years in a very conservative area. And, you know, we still go through that same kind of, you know, dance that everybody else is doing, where it's 2 steps forward and 1 step backward, you know, every 4 years or whatever. And so we're in another political cycle right now that'll take us through the same kind of you know, rumba that we do. But my chapter also falls out on the facilities side because my background is architecture, but it also kind of has morphed into how we work with curriculum and how we do practices throughout the school division. So I'm fortunate, and I get to kind of get into everybody's kitchen throughout the whole process. But that's the short and sweet of mine.
Great. Lisa. Whole school and district whole district sustainability is a critical topic these days. I believe that education for sustainability and creating learning environments that model sustainability is a necessity. It's no longer an option. What do you think, or why do you think the topic is so timely, and how can we get these books to every educator and educational decision maker across the country?
I'm going to tackle the first part of that question. The second part, I wish I knew the answer to. And so maybe those of us all on the call, we can put our heads together on that one. First of all, it's so good to see everybody, and I scanned the names of the folks on the webinar, and I'm so happy to I'm not seeing you, but I know you're present. I know many of you, and so appreciate all of you. You all are on the cutting edge doing such important work for our local communities and our global community. And I think that's what makes whole school sustainability so relevant and so important, is that we have social, economic, environmental, and individual well-being issues that are of critical importance right now. And that hits us in our families, it hits us in our local communities, and it definitely hits us globally, right? Issues such as climate change and biodiversity loss. But then issues of individual well-being and children's sense of their ability to contribute and make the world a better place, alongside this sense of well-being or lack of well-being that so many are feeling, especially post-pandemic. And I think whole school sustainability offers solutions to all of these issues presenting us today. It gives us an opportunity to design, lead, and manage facilities that are healthy and vibrant and engaging, and that link to the curriculum. And it gives us an opportunity to think about how to make our curriculum even more relevant to each student. And the list just goes on and on, right? We want our students to be engaged, and so we have to present them with learning opportunities that get them involved in their local community and understanding the connections that makes to their global community. And how to get these books into every educator's hands, like, yes, let's do that.
Amy and Tim, do you have any additions in the importance and the critical nature of this work at this point in time, at this moment in time?
I echo everything that Lisa said for sure. And I think, I had made a note that there are certain standards, and certainly in California, we have certain standards where we have to make an explicit connection in this work. So we're legally required to do this, which is a nice added bonus for some accountability. And very recently, California has even passed laws that schools are required to sort waste more than just putting everything in the landfill bins for trash. So we're getting some laws and accountability that help us move people along. But I echo what Lisa said about bringing students along. And the beginning of my case story starts with a group of fourth graders speaking to our city council, asking them to ban single-use water bottles at public events in our city, not our district, in our city. And you have to read to the end of the chapter to know if that passed or not, but that our kids know what's good for the environment, what's good for the world. And if we listen to kids, and if we open the doors and recognize that there's connections across content areas where kids can make those connections for us in any class they take any day of the year in any school, the kids will lead us in the right direction. We just have to give them the freedom to do that.
Great. Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're obviously at a critical juncture here. We're approaching it from this whole triple bottom line approach like Lisa talked about. And so the big task here is how do you reduce emissions, and how do you engage everybody in that whole process of how you're going to reduce emissions. And so I think by using that whole kind of three legs of that stool, the economic, the social, and the environmental side of it, everybody can kind of have a seat in the discussion there. And it leads to much broader discussions around empathy and equity and inclusion. And empathy is the big nut to crack right there. If we can take this generation of kids that are coming through school and teach them how to solve problems in a more empathetic way, then they start to understand that kind of interconnectedness and interdependencies of kind of global systems, because it's a global problem. And so how do we engage these kids at a global level is the big struggle, I think. So we can have this kind of exponential growth across the US that we need across the globe.
And on the curriculum and instruction side, we always talk about place, starting with place and going to scale. And we here in the second section, there are 4 chapters about curriculum and instruction. And in every chapter, we find really wonderful lessons learned. And there are trends and patterns in those lessons learned. So Tim and Amy, what were some of the lessons learned, or what have been some of the most important lessons that you have learned in working at the district level in transforming the system? It's not you're not tinkering with part of the system. You both, and even Lisa has mentioned all aspects of the system. So talk a little bit about the lessons learned as you have tinkered and transformed your school district, the whole system.
All right, I'll chime in. The biggest lesson learned for me, or one of the biggest struggles, is I'm somewhat introverted. And so when you're doing this, it's very hard I like to look at the big picture. I like to put my head down and like to just get all of that stuff done and get it going in place. And we're very bad about self-promotion and talking about our successes and all that. And if one of our main goals is how do you educate people about what you're doing, you have to get out there and talk about your successes and what you're doing. You have to market all of the things that you're doing. And so for me, that's one of the toughest things to do. And it's one of the biggest lessons learned is, we have to engage our media and communications folks at the school level. We have to get other people involved. And how do you put this stuff out? I'm a troglodyte. I don't do social media or any of that stuff. So I need other people who do those types of things and get that word out. And that's been my biggest lesson learned through this whole process.
Amy?
I would echo that. Absolutely. One of my points was to continue to tell the story and to use student voices to tell the story, whether through social media or other avenues. But I think, we've been incredibly blessed to have a school board that fully supports this work, which matters tremendously. But that doesn't mean that every member of our community understood what the goals were or supported the work from the beginning. So we continue to tell the story and bring more people into the story. And anything students say is better heard and better received than anything we can say. So having the students tell the story helps us. Some of the other things that have helped in our journey has been making sure that this is the work, not an add-on to the work. So having environmental stewardship as one of our 4 pillars, not that we believe in learning, oh yeah, and we want to be green. It is one of the 4 pillars. It is equal to academic excellence and health and wellness, and having that be part of our strategic planning and being consistently part of the planning means that it is the work, that we look at our facilities and our curriculum and instruction from the environmental stewardship lens. So it's not the other thing we do when we have time and extra money. It is the work. And then I would say that again, I only came here 2.5 years ago, and part of the interviewing and the onboarding process in any department in our district is knowing about green initiatives. If you don't know it, you better be ready and willing to learn and take part in the work, because you're not going to get hired and stop the work. You're going to get hired and do the work with us. So making sure that when you're interviewing, hiring, onboarding, that everyone recognizes the role they will play for this. And then giving time for our site leaders to share their successes and challenges, because it's different at every site. And if we want them to be the stewards of the message at each site, we need to give them time to share together.
Great. Lisa, as an editor, your other books are, highlight stories about schools and stories of student work. What would it be like for you working with the educators and really helping these budding authors tell their story? What was that like for you? And was it important to do it that way versus another way in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredibly important for us to be hearing from all of you on the front lines who are implementing this work, right? I mean, I get paid to write and research and teach about K-12 education, but no longer in K-12 education. I was a teacher, I was a science teacher who was on the front lines and spearheaded work like this. But for me, it's just so inspiring to hear the stories told in your voices, and then to see the themes that cut across your stories that really align so well with the way I am conceptualizing organizations and teaching about leading organizational change. So we are living systems, but so much of what we know about leading change in organizations is grounded in a different understanding of human organizations that reflects more of a factory model approach. And these stories, I was just reviewing them this afternoon, really just jump out at me that you all, as leaders implementing change, have enacted living system principles to effectively lead this change. And that is super exciting, because in our first book, we talked about the kind of living systems approach to change. And I'm just going to share a couple things that were highlighted there. And I would say they reflect the themes in the case studies. Start small. Living systems begin from small initiatives that grow over time, right? Develop aspirational and purposeful networks and cultivate trust in those networks. We know living systems are healthy. Living systems are deeply networked, right? They have lots of interdependencies built into the system. And so as change agents, we have to do that too. Discover what matters most to your school community and begin there. Begin where the care already exists. And that might be different in Encinitas than Virginia Beach, than Auburn, Alabama. But begin where your community cares. And design processes for co-creation and ownership. Buy-in isn't enough. So that involving of students in getting the message out, that engaging school boards in conversation, all of that is cultivating more than buy-in, it's cultivating ownership. And remain curious, observant, and reflective. And I saw so much evidence of that in the lessons learned pieces of the case studies.
Yep. So
I'll stop there.
Yep. I was, when I look at the lessons learned in each of the chapters, I think, the trends, they're there. Start small, have a plan, listen, be ready to change and flex and be fluid, and share and be open. I love the way you tie it back to systems. Thanks, Lisa. So June 2021, when we submitted this manuscript, actually we, as Victoria mentioned earlier, we initiated the concept of the book back in February of 2020. We submitted the manuscript in June 2021, which was amazing to work with 16 authors to move things forward that quickly. And then here we are. We're launching the book. It's published, it's out, it's doing quite well from what we hear. But you were writing about something in the past. And so I'm very curious, what are the initiatives now when we think about healthy, equitable, and sustainable schools? What are the initiatives now that you're engaged in, or what you have you accomplished that you didn't include in your story? This is an opportunity to brag about how we unpeel the onion and the journey never stops. So we'll start again with Amy. We just keep going back and forth. And Lisa, I also want you to chime in around your research. What are you uncovering and doing now? So actually, we'll start with you. We'll go to Amy, then Tim.
Okay. My current question, and it's not going to be as directly related, I don't think. Well, but maybe it is. It is related. My current passion is really trying to understand, how do we develop school leaders who have enough understanding of these issues so that they cease being barriers to the work. Not everyone who leads a school district is Tim Baird or Amy Illingworth. It's just, that's not the norm for our district leaders. And so many of our district leaders have not had access to the information in their preparation programs that make them predisposed to understanding these issues. Now, if they were science teachers, maybe, right? But not all administrators are science teachers. And I'm really working on, how do we cultivate leadership preparation programs that include this information, along with all the important issues around curriculum development and social justice and equity. And we just also need to bring in these pieces around environmental responsibility, whole school sustainability. And I have a grant proposal out now. This semester is kind of a waiting game to see which pathway is going to open up for further work. So I'll pause.
Nice. Great. Amy, I know you're doing some exciting work, so.
We are. The first half of the exciting work is that we just got to go back to what we used to do pre-pandemic. And even though we're still in it, our farm lab, which is a place-based experience that every student in our district gets to have at least one day of every year, had been shut down all last year. So just having every student have that opportunity again is huge. And it is a fully functioning organic farm. And we've done so much. Our farmers have been able to continue working and growing our produce all throughout this time. So while students weren't there, everyone who comes onto the campus now recognizes all the growth that has happened and sees how all the beautiful changes that have happened, and really are able to enjoy the place and the space and the learning this year. So we're just excited to be back to where we were. And some of our new additions, we have a pilot going through a grant where we have a farm stand run at one of our schools one day a week by students. So our students fully run a farm stand where they are selling the organic produce from our farm to their parents at pickup and at drop off time once a week there. So we're really excited to see if that's a model that might be replicatable at other schools. And we have partnered with BCK, who is our sustainability partner in our environmental lessons. And they've been very on one single track of helping us with some water waste and prevention. And this year with their partnership, we've expanded so that our schools have choice in the additional lessons we offer. So not only do we have our water internship, we have waste diversion, garden support, climate action, air pollution, and food eco-literacy, all mini units of study that schools could choose from. And so we've got projects going in all those areas amongst our 9 schools that we're really excited about right now.
Great, excellent. All right, Tim.
All right, so the next deep dive for us, and Jenny's been involved in this with us, is how we kind of step back and take a look at our curriculum and how this kind of triple bottom line concept, or the language around triple bottom line, how we dovetail that in with all of our curriculum at every grade level. And so rather than, like Amy said earlier, you can't have it as an add-on. It can't be something you're adding to teachers saying, hey, now we're getting into the sustainability side of things, and this is how the discussion is going to go. It has to overlap everything. And so at every grade level, there's, the subject matter can be tied into social, economic, and environmental outcomes. It's no problem to do that, but teachers aren't necessarily familiar on how to do that. And so we have to kind of coach them on language that they use, how maybe they change what they talk about in the classroom to use some of this language so it becomes familiar to students. And I think we've been thinking about this for a long time. Back in 2016 is when we kind of got all the leadership for the school division in a room and talked about, okay, how do we start thinking about our operations, or how we operate as a school division around this triple bottom line model. But we always knew that the second part of that discussion was a much deeper dive into curriculum that reached across the school division. And it took us a number of years to get here, because we had leadership change. You had leaderships that was totally into it at the curriculum level and wanted to do it. And then that leadership changes, new leadership comes in. And so it's just been a very long process to get there. And now we're finally there, where we're taking that deep dive into curriculum right there. And I think what kind of shined the light on that for us is we opened an environmental studies program a little over a year ago, 2 years ago almost. And so that program is for 11th and 12th graders, and they have certain criteria, certain boxes that they have to check before they're eligible for that class. And so we realized in looking through all those applications that there wasn't a lot of diversity in that. And so the problem is, if you start looking, especially at the Title I school level, and in those communities that are, where you have those folks that are not necessarily thinking about sustainability, at an early age or later on, how do you start engaging them very early on at the elementary school level, and then that Title I carries in that middle school, and then by the time they get into their high school or their 10th grade, when they can sign up for this course, how have they checked all the boxes that they need to? So part of this process of looking at curriculum is, how do we start piloting it at the Title I school level and work through there in order to kind of increase diversity as well in these sustainability fields.
Great.
The next big one for us.
And they are big. I mean, each new layer to the onion, and you all know that we have shifted our tagline is healthy, equitable, and sustainable schools. We used to talk about green, healthy, and sustainable schools, and that equity component is such a critical piece that it is at the core of sustainability. And until we figure it out, as a movement, we are pretty pale. And so we need to begin to address those issues related to that, and figure out how we engage all across the lifespan, historically underrepresented and excluded populations. So thanks for raising that. We're super excited about that initiative that you're taking on there, Tim. I have one last question, but we have a few questions in the Q&A that I'll frame for you. And those that are in our audience, if you have any specific questions or broad questions, even generalized questions, would we please add them to our Q&A portion of in your dashboard. So if you had a magic wand, this goes back to my earlier question, how do we get these things to all educators and decision makers? If you had a magic wand, what would you suggest? And what would you want all schools and school districts to do to just start the journey? What would your magic wand, what would we need to do to help everybody just begin the journey? One step. What would you recommend?
I'll tell you, I have two wands, and in my dream wands, the two things that happen are that everyone asks and involves students. Start with the students and see what they're passionate about and have them lead the initiatives and the change. And then one that comes directly from Dr. Tim Baird is start with a green team. Bring together some people who want to do this work, who want to talk about this work. Bring your champions of the work at the site leadership level, the district leadership level, your community, your parents, your partners. Start coming together and talking about what's possible, what's out there.
Great.
So my big ones are, and I've got two of them. One is don't ask for permission, better to ask for forgiveness. You know, if you think you have a great idea, you throw it out there, it's going to get shot down right away, and then you're going to get stomped on before you even get started. So don't do that. And then the other one is to, you know, think big, start small, pilot, and then act now. You know, just go out and do something.
Yeah, great, great. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Amy. Lisa?
I'm going to jump to a different scale. I would really like to see the Department of Ed put out some standards and expectations for school leaders to engage in learning about this work. I think we need some national encouragement for educators to join the conversations that are happening.
That are happening.
They are happening, and they are happening in many schools, and they're definitely happening among students, right? But we need bottom up, top down, and some top down leadership from our Department of Education would be phenomenal. That's that's what I would wave my wands for at the moment.
Great. So policy, really beginning to look at policy, look at licensing, look at those things that influence how people make decisions. I totally agree with that. We are doing a review right now to figure out where, as an organization, we're going to invest our policy efforts. And, you know, there is a lot of policy happening on the facilities side of things, but there is not a lot happening when it comes to exactly who is running the schools and how they're running the schools, and what they're teaching. Because we always talk about, you know, where we learn matters, what we learn matters, and how we learn matter. And so how do we, you know, what policies can we put in place to make shifts and the critical shifts that are necessary? So great. So the first question that has come in, and I highly encourage our audience to post some questions here. So it is about that resistance. You know, how do we move beyond the resistance? And the person asking the question talks about equitable, environmental, and sustainable education. So there's three, you know, equity, you know, how do we push against the resistance on equity and, you know, the injustices and the inequities that we have in our school districts? What do we push? How do we push against the resistance related to environmental learning embedded in our schools, and sustainability, operations, and management? What are some of the tips that you have for addressing resistance? And share stories. Share stories and lessons. I think our audience would really enjoy hearing some lessons.
So, you know, we've talked about this before. I think most of the time the pushback is people don't get started on this because they say it would never work in my area. The politics wouldn't allow it to happen. And so I wish more people would just say, hey, you know, if those folks in Virginia Beach, in a very extremely conservative city, can do it because they kind of have proven the economic model, then point them in our direction. So if you have school board members or you have superintendents who are kind of trying to wrap their head around it, use the examples that are out there. You've got folks like Amy, you have folks like me and our superintendent who, is more than happy to talk to other school board members or other superintendents, and we do that all the time. We'll have people wrestling with that program of the problem of how to get it started in their area. And then once they can kind of talk to our leadership and look at it from their perspective, they realize that, hey, if they can do it in a super conservative area, we can probably do some of those things in our area. So use the examples of other folks that are out there, to get you started.
Give them a book. Amy. Oh, Lisa, go ahead.
I just want to piggyback on to what Tim said there, because I also live in a deeply conservative red state, that you might think that my graduate students would show and demonstrate a lot of resistance to these ideas, and they do not at all. And one of the ways that I have found to be most helpful is getting them, most of them are teachers and or administrators, and I ask them to interview their facilities, somebody from their facilities side of the house. And these groups don't always talk to each other very much, and so they feel a little bit awkward about that. I know that's not true in Virginia Beach, but it's true in a lot of school districts. And when they have these conversations and they find, I just read a student reflection yesterday on this very interview, they are amazed at the work that is happening, that the passion that is present for being fiscally responsible, right? Fiscal responsibility might come before environmental responsibility in many of my districts, but the good news is that it's the same solutions. Mm-hmm. And so finding what matters to your local community and hooking into that and then getting that word to spread, I think is so valuable. And so I'm learning from our students here that there's actually a lot less resistance to these ideas than the media would suggest to us at this time.
That's great. And again, on our side, we have a waiting list of schools and school districts to work with us, because there is a desire to do this work and to scale it and to go fast rather than slow. Amy.
I'm going to come from a different angle, just because equity is a key focus for our district this year. And so, but the answer is the same for sustainability work, because my answer is education and resources. People need both to get out of their silos, to get out of anything that they're pushing against or resisting. You're resistant to what you don't know or what you don't feel like you would be successful in doing in whatever your environment is. So this year we are bringing every single staff member in our entire district, every teacher, classified staff member, certificated leader, everyone in our district is going through 3 half-day professional development sessions around equity and how we've defined that in our district. So part of it is we're leveling the playing field and starting the conversations with every single person. And what we do with equity is what we do with sustainability. We ask one another to figure out, where do we all belong? How can we make sure everyone feels included and welcome and find your place within our community? And then what do the kids want for us to be better at? And again, the kids will tell us, get rid of the plastic straws. The kids will also tell us, I want to see myself represented in the books you read to me. So whether it's sustainability work or equity work, listening to our students and then providing an education foundation for the adults, and then the resources to do the work. So the resources may be additional lesson planning or time to find the resources they need, the books to bring greater representation into the work. We can believe in something and still not know how to take action. So giving the education and the resources helps get us to the point of action.
Great. We've got a number of really nice questions in here. So I want us just maybe to have one person respond to each so we can get an insight in each one. So who would like to address, and it might be Tim, how does the design of schools and their campuses affect the abilities of teachers and administrators to create healthy, equitable, and sustainable schools? So the physical plant, how does the design of schools and campuses influence this work?
So, what we found with especially during COVID is we'd had a handful of schools, over the last 6-7 years or whatever, that we designed around these collaborative workspaces within the building, trying to get away from that model of what we would call stack them deep and teach them cheap, where you have rows of kids and seats there. And so we want to create these spaces where we have these hallways that might expand and contract, where you have areas where they can collaborate out there, but much more of a non-traditional model where they can move out and kind of fill all these spaces throughout the building. And we found that during the COVID environment, that turned out to be very beneficial when they're looking for ways to get that 6 feet of distance or whatever between all the students and get them out there. The buildings that we designed around these models that have natural daylight that come into all these spaces, it allows kids to get out there and use those spaces for collaborative learning. Turned out to be a lot less problematic than trying to fit a COVID type environment in an existing building where you had narrow corridors with lockers on each side. So I think that's one really big way that it kind of helps in that whole process. But it becomes this kind of tangible example for people to see. Okay, I see how they're collecting rainwater and they're using that to flush toilets. I see how they're using light sensors and all to do daylight harvesting, or how we're managing stormwater on the site. All those things become visible to the students in there, and it's not some kind of hidden thing that maybe people talk about out there, but nobody actually sees it in operation. So
Great.
So those a beacon for the students and the community.
The links between the curriculum and the instruction.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Right.
Every aspect of a building fits somewhere in the curriculum. So great. So what are some strategies that you use? This is a good one for all of us, but somebody's got to jump in here. What are the strategies you use to hold yourself and your committed stakeholders accountable to the goals you've set, especially the day-to-day roller coaster ride that public education in the world recently has? So what are the strategies that you use to hold yourself and your stakeholders accountable?
I'm happy to take that one briefly. I think, again, having these action items as your pillars, your number one goals that stay part of your organization over time, meaning multiple years, helps. We report to our board every quarter on our key pillars. So we are going to talk about environmental stewardship 4 times a year and make sure that we're giving progress updates at the board level. And something as simple as always making it a standing agenda item on whether it's your leadership meeting, your team meeting, your department, your site meetings, always having it a standing agenda means you're going to have to keep talking about it. And then you're going to gather the data to be able to stay accountable for what you've set. And we know that it gets bumped further on below the agenda, depending on the crises at the time. But if it's there and you see it regularly, you know you're going to come back to it, and it matters to everyone.
Great. And I think that is absolutely essential. Having it part of your strategic plan makes it live and makes it essential, setting goals.
And I think that's a critical reason why the upper administration, we need both. We need both student voice and upper administration, because they're the ones who have positional power to call those questions and set those agendas.
Yeah. So here's a question that I don't know, Lisa, if you're going to want to field it. We might have to problem solve together on this one. So there, mentioned earlier that the federal Department of Ed, the importance of support from the federal Department of Ed to communicate about this work. Victoria wonders how the Trailblazers on the call and in the book support the Green Ribbon Schools program, which is a communication tool to spread these ideas. State departments of education are woefully underfunded to support and engage in the programs in states who actively engaged in Green Ribbon Schools. But all of our Trailblazers are examples. How can we engage our Trailblazers to support the Department of Ed Green Ribbon program and at the state level?
Yeah, I think a lot of them already are green ribbon districts and or schools. Many of them, I'm not sure all of them are, but many in the book I'm certain are.
Yeah.
So I think there is support for that program there. I guess I'm gonna suggest that I think Department of Ed While they may not have a lot of funding to point towards us, they could rewrite their grant calls though, because they do put out grant money. I think they could draw attention and it wouldn't cost them anything but some words. They have a bully pulpit from which they could speak to the importance of these things, and that doesn't have to cost them a lot of money or even a lot of time. So that's one thing. But then I also think that with just an invitation, if Department of Ed wanted to provide a platform for Trailblazers, for educators on the call to speak to these things and to celebrate the progress and the awesome work that's going on in these schools, they could do that. So those are things that come to mind off the top of my head.
I think I need to talk to Andrea and schedule a webinar with the Department of Ed, similar to what we're doing tonight. So anyway, so yeah, definitely. Tim or Amy, any other thoughts about how to engage with at the state level and the federal level?
Well, you know, I don't get too wrapped around the axle in engaging at the state or federal level because they're changing all the time. And so, you know, we've been doing this for 20 years and administrations come and go, superintendents come and go, all of that stuff. So I don't really give that a lot of thought. You know, we just keep doing what we're doing and don't pay a whole lot of attention to that stuff.
Okay.
Although we are a green ribbon school division, you know, so we do see value in those things because our school board, you know, values seeing us get awards for different things that we're doing. So there's a lot of value in those national awards.
All I would add is, to me, it's about telling the story. You know, having the ribbon gives you another platform from which to tell the story. And one of my big passions is, how do we get the people who aren't on this call to hear this or to have the book in their hand? Like you've all said, I've worked in many other districts that haven't even started these conversations. So the more ways that we can tell the story and bring other people into the conversation, the more power in whichever way we do that.
Absolutely. And one of the key purposes of the Green Schools National Network and our partners with schools is not only to help them in their journey, but to help them tell the story so we can spread the word. You know, we hope to have an exemplar in every state around the country that can, you know, go to the State House if needed and talk as needed. And so that is something that is still a part of our work, and there are books to come. We are, you know, this was the first book, and we are super excited to have the first book under our belt and trying to figure out when we can pull the group together again to write another book. And we have a couple of ideas: the curriculum component, that intersection between equity and sustainability, the intersectionality and how that plays out is really important to us as well. So stay tuned. We will continue. Can we bring the slides back up? We're going to close out. I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank Lisa, Tim, Amy. I love having these conversations because we learn, you know, when we read in the book, we can read and we highlight certain things, but when we meet the people and hear the stories, we know we can feel so much more possibility. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here tonight. And I want to begin to thank everybody who is out there in the audience, and this recording will be available. So we had quite a few more people register who are not here. So we'll be sending the link out tomorrow or soon, maybe not tomorrow, with the webinar. So please share it broadly with your community. That will be available. You'll be able to locate it on our website as well as through links. We would love for you to purchase a book if you have not purchased a book. We have, what is super exciting is all of the editors have agreed that the proceeds from this book goes to Green Schools National Network to be able to support the work and support the next project. And so Lisa, thank you for that, and David and Cindy as well. We'd like to, so you can get the book from Routledge or on Amazon. We are listed in Amazon Smile, so if you have not selected your nonprofit on Amazon Smile, just Google green or in the search engine on Amazon Smile, look for Green Schools National Network and click us. We get a little tiny check from Amazon every quarter based on some of our partners who are supporting Amazon Smile. And then finally, I want you, those of you that are here representing schools, if you would like to learn how to join the network, go to greenschoolsnationalnetwork.org. We'll put the link in the chat. We do have a waiting list, but our team is growing and we are super excited to be able to support the work and support the efforts. And stay tuned because there is more to come, as in the same way our districts understand the work never ends. We know that as a nonprofit, as we support our partners and try to blaze the trails to make this go to scale so that all children have a healthy, equitable, and sustainable school. So thank you very much. We hope that you have a great evening. We will see you again soon. Thank you very much.